morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of HUSTL. I am pumped for you guys to get to hear from our guest today. It is my good friend Brent Ayers, who's the CEO of Grin. And we're going to be talking today about scaling a company, doing that with your dad, having a family business, which is the American dream. But it's so cool because their dental practice has gone from 1 location to over 10 locations and over 150 employees. So you guys are in for a treat. So Brent, thanks for being here, man.
Man, happy to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah. All right. We're going to dive right into some content because you said you had a cool story of how Grin started. So let's start there.
It's a longer story, but I'll make it as short as possible.
Okay.
I came from a dental family. My dad's a dentist. It's funny. All growing up, I thought that's what I wanted to be. Like, I'm just going to be a dentist. Mm-hmm. Never thought about anything else. Like, I don't know. I just was like, I'm just going to be a dentist. So I got an undergrad. I'm studying biology, and I'm doing fine. Am I really loving it? Like, I'm not really loving it, but I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
Then Dad, I'm talking to him one night, and he was like, yeah, you need to sign up for some business classes. So just sign up for a business class. So that second semester I'm going through, I'm just like, all right, here's a Econ 101. That's what it was. And I signed up for it, walked in the class, and it just took one lecture. I'm like, okay, I can get down with this. Like, I actually enjoy coming here. And so it wasn't that after that class, it's not like I'm like, all right, I'm not going to be a dentist. Mm-hmm. But it just got me thinking a little bit more. I'm like, you've never really spent any time like seeing what your dad actually does, like chair side with them.
Yeah.
Now, growing up, trust me, if he had an emergency on the weekends, I'm one of 4 boys. He was dragging one of us up there to suck spit for him.
Gotcha.
Like, that was the job. Okay. But that was just going up there and just I'm just turning my head and just sucking spit, and I don't even really want to see what's going on. So anyway, so I was like, called Dad up. I'm like, I really like this class. I think I want to come check out exactly what you do. Mm-hmm. And so I went and spent a day with them, and I realized it's pretty gross. And I've always had a weak stomach. I was the kid that passed out in class if there was blood, vomit. Like, I have a very, very weak stomach.
Okay.
And so I guess it was it dawned on me. I'm like, man, most of the people, like my family and my network of people, I'm not saying we have perfect oral hygiene, but we don't have like the gross stuff that you do see in dentistry.
Yeah.
And so it was there. I spent a few days, and it was then I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this clinical route, but I still had this drive, this like passion for like dentistry. I always just thought it was a cool industry. Like, mm-hmm. It's like one of the only industries where someone can come to you with low self-confidence, or someone can come to you with pain, and they can leave a different person.
Yeah.
So that got my wheels spinning, and this was 2000. This is 2009-ish.
Okay.
And so I told Dad, I said, do you have anyone that you could line me up with that's like really, just focuses on the business side of dentistry? I just want to talk to him. So he's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. And one of his good buddies was a big-time dental consultant out of Sacramento. His name was Kerry Strain. Mm-hmm. So we got on a 3-way call. Dad introduced me to Kerry, and he's just such a genuine guy. And I said, I think I just want to explore this. And he's like, you do? I was like, okay, I'll start sending you stuff. And then he took me under his wing after I finished undergrad for a year and a half. I say, like, he was like my Mr. Miyagi. I was the karate kid. I was just determined. I'm just going to learn everything. I'm going to be a sponge. I'm going to learn everything about this. Mm-hmm. And so I did that for a year and a half and learned the business side from him. And meanwhile, during that whole time, I'm trying to find practices, to acquire.
Yeah.
And my dad had his own group that he started in 1983, had a practice, scaled that to 3 locations, had partners. And, he was talking to me like, why don't you just come on board and with us? And I was like, that's not really for me, I didn't really want to do that. I kind of wanted to create something. Mm-hmm. And so long and short, he was getting frustrated with some of the things that were going on with his group and some of his partners. Like, my dad's a big visionary guy. That's kind of where that's where I got it. Dad.
I read his book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. So he's always preached to us boys about, vision and knowing where you want to go. And so that's when I was just talking to doctors that potentially want to sell. And this is back in 2010-ish, 11. And back then, like it was still like, especially down south, like the dentistry was still the good old boys. Like, unless you were a dentist, you didn't belong in owning practices and operating practices. I get it. Like that's the way it's traditionally always been, but I could see where the industry was headed. The industry was starting to consolidate a lot. Big groups were coming in, buying up practices, a lot like medicine, family medicine saw 20 years ago.
Right. Like when hospitals would come in and just buy them up?
Yep. Yeah. Dentistry is just was behind.
Okay.
And so my dad, I got one doctor who didn't shut the door in my face.
Okay.
And
you know how many doors you went through?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't know. It was enough.
Sure.
But so he had 2 little satellite offices, and these were they're dumpster fires.
Okay.
Like they were awful, and but my dad, he was getting that point where he was frustrated. And so I had this guy on board. He's going to sell him to me, and so my dad approached me, and he's like, "Man, I just love your vision. I'm kind of getting frustrated over here. I think I want to sell out of where I'm at. Could we just jump on this and do this thing together?"
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately I'm like, my dad had a good thing going on. And I was like, man, I'd love for you to, but like, here's the thing. I'm like, you got a good thing going on, and I got 3 brothers. And I can't screw this up. Like, my brothers will never let me live this down.
Right.
And so I was like, you're going to have to talk to the brothers, and you're going to tell them this is your decision. I don't want them thinking I've talked you into this, and I'm truly not trying to talk you into this, And so he was like, I got this. And so I just remember I was so super excited for the opportunity to get to work alongside Dad, because he's a wealth of knowledge and he's such a wise guy. Mm-hmm. But I felt this enormous pressure to, I was 24, and I was learning from the best, but I really didn't know what I was doing. I never put it to practice.
Yeah.
And so I just had this pressure of you can't fail. If you screw this up, your brothers are never going to let you live this down.
Yeah.
And so, but I knew I could do it.
Yeah.
My dad's always raised us to be confident, and not arrogant, be humble, but be confident. Mm-hmm. And so we did it. We took these practices. We had 2 practices. We took them down. Like I said, they were dumpster fires. They were not good. And at first, I felt very honored that this dentist was, he's still a good friend. I felt super honored, man, he gave me an opportunity. This is great.
Yeah. And
but once I got in there, I was like, I don't know if I should feel honored. I think I'm the only idiot that would buy these offices. Is literally how I felt.
Yeah. Well, you were going against the grain anyway, because it
completely
was traditional. It was the dentist that owned the practice.
It was a solo practice. This is back in the day still, where it's you got a doctor, has 1 location. Mm-hmm. There's very few multi-location groups. And so, but looking back now, I tell people this all the time, I would not buy those practices today because of the time, and I don't have the time that it took and the energy that it took to actually make those things work.
Yeah.
But I have 0 regrets on them, because they're super successful practices today. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, it's I would never, because had I taken my dad's first offer, hey, come into my group, he had a well-oiled machine. Mm-hmm. I know so much of what I know today because I bought 2 practices that weren't working, that were broken.
Yeah, so you had to dive in and kind of learn it.
And I had a shoestring budget. So I had to figure it out. Mm-hmm. I couldn't go hire a consultant. I didn't, I didn't have the budget. I remember these 2 offices were just, they were like the Antique Roadshow. If anybody knows dentistry, the old antique dental chairs that were on belt-driven handpieces, that's what we had.
Okay. What year was this again?
This was 2012.
2012, okay.
Yeah, July of 2012. Mm-hmm. And so we go in there, and I mean, I would spend, back then I didn't have kids. I just gotten married. And so my wife, she's a saint. And so she knew what it was going to take to make this work.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I was up there. It was first crack of dawn to 2, 3 in the morning. And I'd work the front desk. I just was doing anything. And then after 5 was my time to, like, no distractions. I'd get in there and either I'm running wire or trying to fix something, putting in technology. The practices had no technology. And so and then I remember my grandparents, they're such great people. They came in there for their dental visit, trying to support us. And I remember they were looking because they were used to going Dad's practices.
Yeah.
Nicest of everything. And I could tell, like, they had this, like, pity look on, like, they're, like, pitying me. Like, and they came to me one time and they sat me down and says, your building needs some work. I said, I know. I'm going to get it working.
Yeah.
Like, just give me some time. Like, we want to give you this. They gave me $10,000 because I had a massive. Because there's another thing. I was told that one of the offices, the Woodruff office, had a little leak in it.
Okay.
And it had a flat roof. And man, the first storm that came through there. I mean, I looked up. I mean, I could see the sun through the ceiling.
It's just a little crack.
It was a massive.
Yeah.
And so they gave me a check for $10,000. And they're like, we need to fix this roof. So I went, got some quotes to fix the roof. That quote came in right at $10,000. And I'm like, man, like, all right, like, super grateful for what they did.
Yeah.
Just to kind of help me get this thing started.
Let me ask you something on that, because there's a term that I can't stand that floats around, that I'm a self-made whatever. Like, I don't think anyone's self-made. Like, you said your dad connected you with someone who kind of taught you the ropes, and then there's always people along the way that you learn from.
Yep.
Like, do you agree with that? Like, am I wrong in saying that? Like, there's always
100%.
people that go.
Yeah. I mean, no one's self-made.
Right.
You have people that maximize their opportunities that are given.
Yeah, yeah.
And others that don't.
Yeah.
And it's like, I always, like, I have this mindset, like, where I literally try to talk myself out of things. Mm-hmm. Because if I could talk myself out of things, it was never worth me chasing.
Yeah, yeah.
If I can't talk myself out of doing something, I'm going to do it. I'm committed to it.
Oh,
so,
that's good.
I couldn't talk myself out of this stuff. I was going to do it.
When you think back, like, to that journey when you talked about the early in the morning until 2 a.m., I mean, your wife knows what goes into that. You think entrepreneurship is kind of over-glamorized a little bit?
Oh, way over-glamorized. Like, everyone wants to be the entrepreneur, but very few are willing to put in the work to do it.
Yeah. Like, I'm 2 years into the journey, and it's a different grind. But
it's lonely.
It is. It's very lonely because it's hard. Like, when your company or your concept, like you went through, is one of one, it's not like you have a case study that you can just go learn from. But it's your mind, at least for me anyway, like, my mind does it. It's very hard to shut it off from what I'm doing and thinking. And so, like, I have to be very practical, like, when I'm with my wife and kids, of thinking, okay, you guys need me here right now. But then the moment that stops, I'm right back into
Yeah, you got to be present for your family. And I was fortunate, too. My wife, before we had kids, she worked in the business.
Okay.
And we learned very quickly we have to have boundaries, because we'd catch ourselves back before kids. So we'd get home from work, and, I'd bought 2 practices. So, a lot of times I'm bouncing around between the 2. And she worked strictly in one office. And so we'd get home from work, and we'd catch ourselves the whole dinner time. We'd be sitting there eating dinner. We're talking work every single second. What went on with the day? What went well? What do we need to do? And I remember this one time we were eating, we were like, we got to set up boundaries. We can't talk about work all the time. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
We gotta have time for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the best things that we did for our relationship is create those boundaries to where it's like, hey, when we get home from work, work is done. It's me and you. We're back to, we're not coworkers anymore.
Right.
We're spouse.
So speaking of that, so you worked a family business. You worked with your wife. You're also working with your dad. How do you manage the boundary or the balance of, like, you're my dad, but you're also my business partner?
Yeah, it's important. And at times it can be challenging because like my dad's just as passionate as I am. So when you're passionate about something, you just want to talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But when we're having Thanksgiving dinner and, or like we're just over at my parents' house with all my brothers and everyone, it's like, they don't want to hear this stuff.
Yeah.
And I love my dad so much. He's awesome, but like we both have the tendency because we're so passionate about it.
Yep.
Like we have to have boundaries as well. Because I still like, as much as I love my dad as my business partner, like I still want to be my dad.
Yeah,
I don't want it to shift from like 90% business partner, 10% dad.
Yep.
Because it just kind of takes the relational part of it out of it. That I just want to. It's like me and my dad and all my brothers. We love to hunt and fish, and we love just being outside. And like if we take the boat out, go fish or whatever, it's like we'd have to like, all right, we're talking about anything except nothing. We're not talking no program. It's done. Like we're talking about fish. I don't care what we're talking about. We just don't want to talk teeth.
Sure.
Like that's it. Yeah. And so, but it's fun. It really is fun. Like, and I know a lot of family businesses can turn out terribly.
Right.
Like, you read those stories, you hear about these stories.
Heard them and I know them.
Yeah. And I think it's both. It comes down to having like a mutual respect for each other's gifts and just staying out of the other person's lane. My dad's a clinician. Like, I'm not going to go and tell him how to cut teeth and I'm not going to tell him anything clinical. And he respects me from like a business standpoint. My dad's a good businessman as well. So like I value his input and stuff, but he knows where I'm more gifted than him. And I know the areas that he's more gifted in.
Was that something you guys had to be intentional about? Or did it just kind of come natural of like, you need to know, hey, we need to have a business conversation versus, hey, I need my dad right now?
I think it's just, you definitely have to be intentional about it. Because if you're not intentional, again, it's too easy to slide back into all business.
Yeah, sure.
So I would say you 100% like have the conversation early, like, hey, we both have this vision. We have a lot of alignment here. Like we know where we want to go. We know what we got to do to get there, but we're just not going to do it 24/7.
Yeah. So, all right, let me go back to the beginning here. When you get started, you buy these two practices that are dumpster fires. Did you have people close to you telling you that you were nuts, or was everyone pretty much in your camp really supportive?
Well, I'll tell you, there were people, because the first offices we bought were in the town of Woodruff, not Woodruff Road. Like this is when like Woodruff's grown a lot.
Yeah,
now.
It has.
But in 2012, you had to tell people like, "Oh, Woodruff Road, where on Woodruff Road?" No, there is a town called Woodruff.
Right.
And the other one was out near Bowling Springs. And so, but I remember like going into the town of Woodruff in 2012 was the most depressing place to be. It was a mill town that everything had left the town. The main street has a beautiful main street, like the old buildings and stuff, but it was depressing because there was nothing in them. And so I remember, people would tell me like, "You're going where? Woodruff?" Like, they're like, are there teeth in Woodruff? Like, I'm like, I think so.
Right.
So it's like the rural area that was nothing was hopping there. There wasn't much going on.
Yeah.
And so, but I knew I knew a lot of people because it's funny, like a lot of the younger dentists and they all want to go. Like, I can't tell you if I had a dollar for every time one of our doctors said, "Why don't you set up a practice in downtown Greenville, like on Main Street?" And I'm like, go down Main Street and see how many dentists are there.
Yeah.
That's why I like rural towns, because no one was looking to go to Woodruff.
Right.
Woodruff was a small town, but I promise you, if you can own a small town, you got a great practice.
Well, and that one thing I think is such a good skill that you have. I mean, we've worked together for, 8 months now, but I feel like a lot of people with an employee mindset, they see problems, and entrepreneurs, like you just learn to see solutions where you see, hey, no one's really going here. What's the opportunity? Let me go there.
Yeah. There's a story about a shoe salesman. I don't know if it's a parable or it's probably not a true story, but I read it in a book. Okay. It was a shoe company sent a sales guy out to Africa. And they send the sales guy out, and he's out there for like a month. And he comes back, and he's like, I'm done. And they're like, why? He's like, because no one wears shoes in Africa. And so they're like, all right. So he leaves. They hire another guy. He goes to Africa, and he calls back a couple days later. He's like, great opportunity. No one wears shoes here.
Yeah, that's right. Same situation. Just looking at it.
Different perspective. So that's where I look at these kind of smaller markets, and I'm like, there's not a lot of dentists here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's good opportunity. Yeah.
So when you started, you've got those two practices, you feel the pressure. And I remember, like I'm vividly remembering a conversation I had with Steph, my wife, at church of like, hey, I'm the only income producer and I want to quit my job and start this business. We have 3 kids at the time. And she was like, I'm for you. You can always go back and get a job. And that support was everything. But I remember the weight of like how that felt. And what you mentioned, the pressure when you got started. Was there a moment or a few moments where it shifted where you're like, I got it. And like, I'm good. Now let's take this thing to what it is now.
Yeah. I would say it was probably like a year into it.
Okay.
Probably a year into it. I felt like I could see some light.
Yeah.
Like I could see like the practices were growing. And
not the crack in the roof, but another light.
Yeah. Yeah, not the crack. Yeah, not that light.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so I could feel momentum. I could feel, you could sense that something was shifting, and a lot was culture. Like, the practices didn't truly they didn't have a great culture. They were just stagnant. These practices were the same. I mean, these were really, really old practices. And so, but I feel like these practices were the exact same as they were 30 years ago. And I knew that had to change. Because my dad and I are both like this. Like we're never complacent. We're always changing. We're always going to grow. We're always looking to do something better.
Right.
And so, yeah, I did. Like after about a year, and I could see because at first we were getting these practices were getting 5 to 10 new patients a month, like nothing. And then after years, we're getting 70 new patients, 80. I'm like, okay, we got it. Now we just kind of got to continue to focus on because the hardest part was when you buy a business like that everything needs to be redone. Like nothing really works. It's like, where do you start?
Right.
It's like walking into a playroom when your kids have wrecked it. Yeah. You're getting them all together and guys, we got to do something about this. But I'm like, where do we start? Yeah. You just pick a corner and you start there and you make this part better.
Yep.
And then once you kind of got that, systemize it, and you go to your next part. It's like you can't just look at this mountain of stuff. Just tackle one thing at a time.
Well, let me ask you this about culture, because you mentioned that. I think it's way easier to build, if you're starting a company from scratch and building the culture from ground up versus taking a negative culture and turning it around.
Oh, no doubt.
So what did that process look like? How did you get people that were already there, that were used to their ways, to kind of buy into a new vision and kind of where you're going?
Yeah. A good story is, Bonnie is one of our dental assistants in our Woodruff office. Bonnie, we are her third or fourth practice owner of that Woodruff office.
Oh, wow.
So she has been there since she's early 20s. She's been there for close to 40 years in this practice. And so again, none of the practice owners had invested in technology and stuff. When I bought that office, it had one computer in the whole office that I'd have to get there an hour before we opened just to crank it.
Yeah.
Yeah. By 8, it'll be working slightly.
Sure.
And so Bonnie, like, they just had this culture where it's like, it was almost a culture of complacency. Like, this practice is what it is. It's always been this way. And so, but Bonnie's a great story because Bonnie, she didn't know how to do any technology. And I had this vision of incorporating, like, I knew we had to incorporate technology. We had to get the standard of care increased in there, and by utilizing the latest technology. And so as I incorporate this, it was resistance. Like, Bonnie just wasn't, it's not Bonnie's fault. Like, Bonnie just had never worked with people that were going to invest in this type of technology and stuff. And so she wasn't tech savvy. And so she's still there today. I mean, Bonnie, we call her the Energizer Bunny. She'll outwork everybody.
Yeah.
And so what you kind of got to find the people. We never go in there and clean house. I would never do that. Like, buy a practice, like, there's groups out there I've heard, like, they'll go in there immediately, they'll buy a practice, clean house, and put their people in there. I'm like, that just rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, it
because
doesn't sit well.
These people had nothing to do with the sale of this business. They were happy working there. They had nothing to do with it. And so our goal is always, and we do a great job at retaining, really probably 99% of all of our acquisitions. Like, we retain
That's awesome.
the people. And so the first thing you got to do is just, you have to build trust.
Yeah.
Like, the people are not going to trust you day one. Like, they don't know you. And I think too often people go into a new business and I'm the new business owner. You should trust me. And they expect people to trust them. I'm like, no. That's
Doesn't work that way.
No,
Yeah.
It does not work that way. It will never work that way. So it's really just going in there and, like, don't try to change things overnight. Like, don't try to change the culture overnight. Don't try to change the processes overnight. Just get to know your people.
Yeah.
So, like, that's what we do. If we acquire a practice, we don't change much at all. Like, for that at least for like the first month. Now, there's some things like, you got to put your deposits in this bank account now.
Yeah.
That's important. That's an important change that must happen day one.
Right.
But as far as, like, the bigger changes, changing the softwares and stuff, it's like that happens later on down the road. We want people to get used to us, to get to know us, and we want to get to know them. And so really, and I would guess for Dad and I both, like, when we see something, we go after it hard. And, like, we want to change it quick. And so for us, we got to temper ourselves to, like, all right, we got to put ourselves in their shoes.
Yeah.
And so as much as we want to go in there and change and improve things quickly, like, we know with as many that we've done at this point, like, that's not the best way to go about it.
Yep. You just gave an unbelievable marketing tip for those of you that are listening and building companies, because I've seen it where people will go in, they buy a place, or even they're starting one from new, and they have employees, and their immediate thought is get message out to the community, which is important, but they abandon the people that are going to help them build the company. And I'm like, you need to invest in them, because those are your best resources in building a brand. Like, the people internally have to be bought in before people externally are going to be bought in.
Because especially, like, a lot of these practices we buy, they have long-term employees that, like, take Bonnie. Like, there was more goodwill tied to Bonnie than there was the previous doctor. Like, Bonnie knows everyone. She knew everyone. I had to have Bonnie on my side in order for this to succeed. And so I think oftentimes people only think that they'll buy, whether it's a dental practice or any other business, it's like all the goodwill is tied to that previous business owner. I'm like, no. A lot is tied to the people, like, because at the end of the day, it's like, I got another practice where one of our team members has been there. This is a third practice owner, and she works the front desk. She working the front desk is like, she's talking to patients way more than the doctor is. Like, she has the relationships. And I remember in that particular practice, day one, we took over. Day one, a patient walked in. Her name's Tracy. She's at our Riverside office. She's sweetest. She's so sweet. But she went to the bathroom for like a minute or whatever, and a patient had walked in while she was in the bathroom, and I remember, where's Tracy?
Yeah.
Where's Tracy? And I'm like, she's in the restroom. She's coming out. But that was like an aha moment. It's like, these people matter to these patients.
Yeah.
Like, don't expect like where I was talking about trust, building trust with the team. Don't expect, your clientele, for us patients, to trust you either. And if you go in there and you just cut the entire staff or whatever, how do you ever expect the patients to even trust you?
Yeah, because when you start marketing and getting the message out in the community, if you have disgruntled employees or people that used to work there,
it's awful.
They can kill all of that.
Yeah, they kill all your momentum. They'll kill your momentum before your momentum starts.
Right. On that note, so I learned a phrase from you that I've stolen probably 20 times since we had lunch a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Talented terrorists.
Oh, yeah.
Define it. How'd you come up with the term? Give me
I wish I can't take credit for coming up with the term.
Okay.
Actually, it's another guy in the dental industry that I listened to. He was a keynote speaker at an event, and he used that phrase, and I'm like, wow, like that's a perfect term for him. So talented terrorist is somebody that is very, very, I'll define it in dentistry. Like, and I'll define it as a doctor. The talented terrorist as a dentist would be, an associate that is super talented clinically, can produce a lot, is doing advanced cases. It's just from a financial standpoint, like they produce and they get after it. However, they are awful for your culture. They're talented clinically. They're terrorists for your culture, and they're the hardest. It's the hardest. I would say it's the hardest people to deal with because you're looking at it. That's where your head and your heart start going against each other because your head's saying, man, look what they're doing. Like they're producing, they're making us money, they're doing great. And then your heart's telling you, yeah, but they're running off their staff and they're not treating people the way you expect they're not treating people the way I would treat people or what our expectations are. They're not in alignment with our culture at all.
Yeah.
And it is until you get in that situation, because if I could just tell you, like, some people are like, well, just let them go. It's like, it's not that easy. Like, because that's your head and your heart will start playing with each other. And it's like, they'll just start butting heads. And it's like, I should keep them, but they're great producers. But maybe I could change the cultural part and like try to work with them. But ultimately it comes down to like, you cannot have any room for talented terrorists at all.
I love that.
And you got to be willing to, because what you're doing by keeping them bored, you're sending a message like, hey, as long as you come in here and you work hard and you're driving the business and you're producing business results, you can act any way you want. That's in our organization. Like, that's not the case because, people, another one of my phrases I use, like, people say cash is king. I say culture is king, because if culture is king, cash will be there. Your profit will be there. But you really like building a culture, a strong culture that's going to last, and you literally cannot afford to have people that are going to wreck your culture.
Yeah,
you can't have it.
That's awesome.
It won't work.
So as we wind down, let me ask you a couple questions. When you had those two practices, was it harder going from like 0 to 2 than it was from 2 to 10?
It's different. So different challenges.
Okay.
Like going from 0 to 1 or 0 to 2, for me, I was still learning, just almost like I was still in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
Trying to work my way up to the big leagues. They're just different challenges. Like, so you're just trying to learn the basics of trying to make one work. But you have different challenges as you scale and grow, because then it becomes, how do you duplicate processes? How do you standardize things? How do you standardize culture when you're not there? I can't be at 11 different offices at one time.
Yeah.
There's sometimes I can't be at even like one office. I cannot be in an office all the time. Like, look here, my offices are open right now. I'm not there. I have to have I have to have trust. You have to build the right team that understand what your expectations are. And the best advice I could give to anyone that's looking to scale a business to multi-location is perfect the one first. Document everything. Get that, have your prototype and make that first location just hum. Like whether and not hum because you're there, like because you're not going to be there on number 2 and number 3. You just build your processes, standardize everything you can, document them, train, and then essentially when you're ready to go and say buy your second location, well, guess what? You got a great team that can help that second location. Then it's not 100% on you to go and integrate your processes and your systems in it. Yeah. You got a team that already knows it. You can put them out there. You can buddy system them up, and so. My biggest piece of advice when it comes to scaling and growing, would be definitely focus on the first one, perfect your first one.
Yeah.
Get that one nailed down and just duplicate it.
That's all. And that goes back to the trust piece, because if you don't value your people and earn their trust, they'll never be there to help when that second location is there.
Never.
So all that stuff is connected.
I got royally obsessed with people have heard the concept servant leadership. And mine was, I got royally obsessed with this concept in college when a buddy of mine told me to read this book. It's called Lead Like Jesus. And I read this book and it's like, because, being a man of faith, you learn about Jesus, Jesus as your Savior, Father, but I never learned about him. No one ever taught me hey, you should study him as a leader. He took 12 nobodies and created what it is today. You got to be a dang good leader to do that. And so I read that book and I was like, oh my gosh, the concepts like Jesus washed their feet, the disciples' feet. It's like he got down and dirty with them. He didn't just throw them out there and say, go make disciples. He prepared them. He empowered them. And so I just started modeling everything after Jesus, as a leader. What did he do? Because he did something really great.
Yeah.
Just from a movement standpoint. And so I'm huge on servant leadership. We do not rule with iron fist. Our role, our jobs are to make sure all of our people have the tools, resources, and the skills to be their best. And you've got to trust your people. You got to bring on the right people. But then, all of the leaders in my organization, they know, it's you last. It's like Simon says, leaders eat last. But if you put that into practice every single day, one thing when I bring on any doctor into our group, we say a handful of things. One is we tell them you can't hold your skill sets hostage. If we have other doctors that want to learn what you do, you got to be able to share it with them. There's enough dentistry to go around. And number 2, you can't wear your DMD or your DDS as a badge. We respect what you did to earn that, but it's not a badge. And the last thing is you're going to have to do things that most dentists aren't really required to do at most offices. And so, but we tell them it's for their benefit. So when I say that, I mean, one of the things we tell them to do is, hey, if you finished up with this patient in this room and for some reason you don't have another patient for another 5 minutes or whatever, and you see your assistant in there breaking down the room, wiping it down, I said, try this. I was like, just throw on a pair of gloves, grab a wipe, and go in there and just start wiping counters down and the lights and the chairs or whatever. I was like, look at that person's face, your assistant's face, because they're going to look at you and be like, well, what are you doing? You're a dentist. You're not supposed to be doing that. But I'm like, that's how you get people. That's how you can influence people and get people to fall on swords for you. And so it's not uncommon. I use the example too. It's they've done studies why Southwest Airlines has the fewest amount of delayed flights. and they've studied it, and what they realized is the pilots on Delta and all the other airlines, once the passengers leave the plane, the next people to leave are the pilots. They're going to the lounge. Well, Southwest, they don't go to the lounge right after that. They're going in and they're picking up trash. They're cleaning the plane with everybody else, which allows them to do it quicker and get their planes back on time.
I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Yeah. So I use that concept in dentistry. I'm like, any chance you can get, like, it makes us more efficient, and you're gonna give influence because people we respect you. You already have a ton of respect just being a dentist. But if you can be more human and be a servant to them, next time you have an emergency that comes in right before lunch that you just want to, you want to get them out of pain and you're going to have to work through lunch, your people are going to be like, all right, let's roll with it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Because they see how you treat them all the time.
Let me kind of sum this up. Like, the main takeaways that I'm hearing is any entrepreneur someone that signs up for the stuff we go through, you're driven. Like, there's certain outcomes that you want financially for your family and things like that.
Yeah.
But it can't be at the expense of people. Like, people have to be first, and then all that stuff comes later. And I'm hearing that in everything you say.
Yeah. If you're going to chase dollars, if that's truly like, I'm going to do this because I can make this, you're either going to fail or be miserable. Mm-hmm. You might get that and make that money, but you're going to be miserable because that's not a deep enough purpose. You gotta have a purpose deeper than your pocketbook. There's more to that. It's like, that's just the financial benefits of it. It's just a byproduct of doing things right, but it should never be your purpose. I paid myself $30,000 a year for like the first 4 years. Like, I was the lowest. Like, if you were to calculate my hours and break it down to an hourly, I was hands down. Like, it was borderline illegal, below minimum wage. Like, but like, I knew I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew eventually it would, I knew eventually I wasn't always going to make $30,000 a year, but like, I didn't really care. I was going to do what I'd much rather my people be taken care of.
Right.
Let me just take care of my people. I'm fine. Like, I live off this, and that's what I did. It's like, put your people first. And I think it's a concept that, it's overused, like putting people first, but it's practically putting it in practice is, it's more rare than it seems.
Well, you've just given us a master class on how to do it, so thank you. Now, you may have some people not be a big fan because you just set a really high bar for anyone that comes after you on episode 2, 3, and 4. No. But seriously, thank you for being on.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's fun. Good time.